Hi. I just want to say how great that last presentation was and how much I enjoyed it. I'm going to take all those tips because I think I need some of them as well. So that was brilliant. Thank you. And I think the way we ended it was really useful as well, because we're talking about what you guys are going to do after all of this. And maybe some of what we're talking about today will be a little bit about something that you guys could do once you've finished college and school and all that kind of thing. So thanks very much. So my name's Louise Kearney. I work in the rare and paediatric team at Labcorp. We're a clinical research organisation, or a CRO. So you'll hear the term CRO quite a lot today. And what we wanted to talk to today was a little bit about what a CRO does, what it's like to work for a CRO, and talk a little bit about our career paths and what that looked like, and also to give you guys an opportunity to ask us questions about what it's like to work in drug development. So if we could go on to the next slide, and probably skip straight on to the next one after that, actually, because I've done 2 slides in one. So the first thing to say is that I work for Labcorp, and that's our CRO, but our company was called Covance not very long ago. Only 2 weeks ago, we were called Covance. So today, if we say Covance or we have Covance in our slides, it's because we're finding it a little bit hard to adjust. Just ignore us, and yeah, replace anyone that says Covance, just replace it with Labcorp. It's the same company, we're just getting used to that change in name. So first section, what does a CRO do? So we start with the drug company. They have a new medicine. They have to prove to the governments that their medicine works better than what there is available at the moment. And they can do that themselves, or they can employ a company called a CRO, a contract research organisation, which is what Labcorp is. So the next few slides I'm going to try and go through. I know I've got really not very much time, so it's going to be a whistle-stop tour of what a CRO does and some of the jobs within that organisation as well. Yeah, so the drug company goes to the CRO and asks us to run their trials for them. If we go to the next slide, it shows the very beginning of the process. So at the very beginning of the process, we have people called regulatory strategists, and they're scientists and physicians, and basically they go to the governments and their regulatory bodies, and they talk with them about what would our program look like? Who will we need to treat with this medication? What are the endpoints, which are the measurements that we use at the end that we'll have to measure? And how much better will we have to make them in order for you, the government, to say, yes, it's okay to use? So they have those discussions. And once they've come up with that, they have like a major plan of how many trials they're going to run and what kind of populations they're in. They'll go to the project managers within the CRO. A project manager is basically the person who plans it all and runs it all. So at this stage, what they'll do is plan what activities need to be done, what stuff they need to do those activities, and what people, how much that's going to cost, and how long it's going to take. So they plan that at the very beginning, and then they stay with the trial right the way through, and they keep tabs on how they're doing against all those things, and they make sure the right people are there in the right places at the right time with the right stuff. And when things go wrong, which they quite often do in a trial, they're the ones that replan and talk about how they're going to change it and start again. So that's project managers. So once they've started planning, they will go to a group made up of physicians and statisticians and medical writers to write the protocol. And the protocol is a document that says exactly what's going to happen for a trial. So who the patients are that are going to be part of it, how often they're going to take a medication or any other intervention, what's going to be measured. And the statisticians would also write a little bit of really clever math stuff that I don't understand, that calculates how many patients they have to treat in and how big a difference they'll have to be made to really be sure that it is actually working and it's just not a coincidence. So they put that document together called a protocol, and then they send it out to the CRAs, which is the next slide. CRAs are contract research associates, and they work all over the world. So what they will do at the very beginning, they'll work all the way through the trial. But right from the very beginning, they'll take that protocol that has been written and they'll go and visit doctors in different institutions all around the world. And they'll introduce them to that protocol. They'll ask them if they're interested in taking part in it, but they'll also assess whether they have the resources and facilities and staff in order to be able to do it, and also whether they have access to the patient population that we're looking at. So they'll gather all that information in and they'll write a whole load of reports and they'll send that back to the project manager and the sponsor, who'll then decide exactly where they're going to do the study and which sites are going to be the ones that actually run the study. So then if we go to the next slide. Once we've decided which sites we're going to, then the submission associates come in. And basically, they put together a whole load of package of different documents, of supporting documents, which includes the protocol, but also includes other things about the drug and what experience there has been to date. And they'll submit them to the regulatory authorities and also the ethics committees at the hospitals they're working in. The regulatory, those bodies basically make sure that the protocol is doing what it aims to do. And it also is, you're getting the information as patients that you need and that it's all ethical as well. So they'll put all those documents in, they'll answer any questions that those bodies might have, and then they'll collect the paperwork that says they've got approval, and that allows the sites to start, which is the next slide. Then the CRAs go back to the sites and they train the staff on what they need to know about the protocol. The PM will make sure that each one of those sites has all the equipment that they need. So all the drug, all the paperwork that they need, all the folders, anything equipment they might need, the PM will make sure it's there, and the CRA will train the site and tell them what to do, what they need to do throughout the study. In some studies, the site itself is a building called a clinical research unit, and they're for special studies that usually only happen with healthy volunteers. And sometimes the CRO can own those sites. So if they do, the nurses and the physicians and the pharmacists will all be employees of the CRO as well. And sometimes we don't ask the patients to come in and see a doctor. We actually send a study nurse out to the patients in their home or in their school, so they don't have to visit the hospital quite as much. And sometimes in those cases, the nurses that go and visit the patients in their homes can also be part of the CRO and be employed by them as well. Okay, so next slide. As part of a clinical trial, unfortunately, there's usually, not always, but usually some blood that gets taken. And those bloods are sometimes sent to a central laboratory so that the scientists in there can analyze all the blood from the trial using exactly the same methods and materials to make sure everything's as similar as it possibly can be. And again, sometimes those labs are owned by the CRO, and all the scientists that work in those labs also are employees of the CRO as well. Next slide. So once the site have consented the patient and gone through the protocol and done all the procedures that they need to, they put all the data into a electronic form called a CRF. And then the CRAs go back to the site and they check that information, that CRF, against the medical records of the patients that have taken part to make sure that it has been collected properly and recorded properly, but also to make sure that the sites are following the protocol. So if the site goes a bit wrong, then the CRA will let the site know about that and train them again to make sure they do it differently next time. Sometimes a patient gets unwell while they're in a trial, and then we have to report that. So there's drug safety staff within the CRO that know how to collect all the information about that particular event and to assess whether there should be a change in the trial or whether it needs to be reported to the regulatory authorities. And if it needs to be reported, they'll submit that to the regulatory authorities as well. So once we've done all this, we have data managers they take a look at the data, they make sure it all makes sense, then they gather bits of data from from all the other data streams. So if your trial that you're working on has a wearable in it that says that you walk around a lot, they'll take the data from the wearable. Or if you have given blood samples, the lab will have that data. So the data manager will take that data. So they'll take all the data together and they'll make sure that it all matches up and all makes sense. And then they'll send it on to the statistician, who will do all the statistician things that they said they would do in the protocol and work out whether the trial has worked or not. And sometimes that includes something called unblinding, because throughout this process in a blinded study, no one has any idea who is taking what drug. So this is the point where the statistician will unblind the study and will say who's been taking which drug and whether the new drug has worked better than the old one. After that, medical writers come back in and they gather all that information and they write a really long report, which then says everything that's happened and the outcome as well. A bit like writing when you're doing a lab at school and you have to write your method and your results and your conclusion. They do that for us, only it's way longer than anything that you have to do at school. So this process we go through several times for each medication that we have. And then once we've done all the trials that we need to do, we'll bring all that information together and we'll submit all those reports that we've written to the regulatory authorities. So on this slide, the FDA. So we have, again, submission associates who are experts at talking back to the regulators and saying, this is what happened and this is what we found out. And it's then that the regulators decide whether a drug has been approved. So as you can, I hope it's been a really quick whistle-top tour through it all. I hope that you can see that there are lots of different people who do lots of different jobs. I haven't even mentioned any of them, but all of them, but there are people who do filing, and then there's HR people and support staff. There's all sorts of people within the industry. So there's loads of opportunities. And if you work within the industry, it's really nice because sometimes you might start off doing one thing, but you move sideways a little bit and you do something different and you find the place that you really sort of fit in with. So that's my quick explanation of what a CRO does. So then if we just move on to the next slide, I think it's a Mentimeter. I was wondering when I put these slides together, whether as a group that I'm talking to, you guys had ever thought about working in drug development or clinical research. So I just wanted to send out a Mentimeter and see if you're interested. So I don't know, that should come up on the screen. Will it work? Oh, I can't see the results because it's in a little screen there. So I can see it says, have you considered a career in drug development? And I think the big blue bar is mostly all A's from what I can see in the little one. Hopefully you'll be able to see that. So I think most people on there, from what I can see from there, and I'm hoping that we can make the Mentimeters bigger when we do our word maps later. Most people, yeah, are thinking about it. There are some who've decided they'd like to do something else. But most of you are thinking about it, so that's brilliant. And I'm hoping that you'll find it interesting what we're going to talk about. So I'm going to pass over to my first colleague, who's Kristen. She's a senior director in site partnerships, and she's going to talk a little bit about what it's like, what that job is, and what her career path has been up to this point. So would you like to skip through to Kristins Slide? There we go.
Thanks, Louise. Hi, everyone. I'm super excited to be here today to talk to you about my journey in clinical research or in drug development. And I only have 5 minutes. And as you can see, my timeline shows you that I've been around for quite a while, have a lot of experience. So I'm going to boil it down literally to really one word. And I'm going to say that word is poop. I know that sounds pretty crazy, but that is how I got into this industry, and it's led me to a lifelong passion to work with patients and sites. So currently, I'm the Senior Director of Site Partnerships. That means that I'm a middleman between our clinical research teams that are executing the protocols and the physicians and the sites that are actually performing those protocols and finding the patients. So I try and make everybody's journey easier in how they perform on those protocols. So it didn't start that way, though. It started in university when I thought I was going to be a doctor. I got there and realized very, very quickly that I personally did not want to work as hard as I needed to work to become a doctor. But I really, really, really loved science, and I wanted to stay in science. So I got my degree in biological sciences with truly no idea what I was going to do next. So I spent 4 years as a research associate in some cardiovascular research labs doing bench science. I enjoyed that. It was a really good scientific basis for what I would end up doing as a career. But for me, working with animals turned out to be much more challenging than I thought. And so at the end of those 4 years, I was looking to get out of animal research, which is truly a very important aspect of what we do, but not personally for me. And found a job in what was called a special GI lab. GI stands for gastroenterology, for anyone who doesn't know that. And there I got my first exposure to clinical trials. This lab was founded by a brilliant gastroenterologist called, whose name was Dr. Richard Brewer. And there was 2 parts to this lab, and I thought I was joining for the scientific part of it, the bench science part of it. And what we did is we collected 24, 48, and 72-hour stool samples, poop samples. People brought them in paint cans and Tupperwares, you name it, dropped it off the front desk. We were loaded into the sub basement. If you guys haven't been in a lot of hospitals below the first floor, most of them have sub basements, and that's where they put somebody who has the name of special GI lab. So what we would do with those stool samples is we would cook them, literally cooking poop, and we could tell from the chemical analysis of those samples where the physician should look first for any discomfort or symptoms that the patient was happening. So should they look small bowel, large bowel, pancreas? And that saved a lot of invasive procedures for the patient, as well as insurance dollars and costs to the patient and to the hospital. Kind of as a side gig, Dr. Brewer had hired a PhD researcher, and their goal was to cure Crohn's disease. They had started an investigator-initiated clinical research trial. That means that they did it all their own. They got their own funding. There was no pharmaceutical company helping them, no CRO helping them. They were doing everything that Louise just said on their own in the sub-basement of this hospital. And it was my job to suddenly be the clinical research coordinator and the clinical research associate for 8 to 10 sites that were enrolling into this clinical trial for Crohn's disease. Suffice it to say, it was a bit of a mess. I was the 3rd person working on it, and I had no idea what I was doing. While I was there, Dr. Brewer sold this idea to a pharmaceutical company, and they sent in a real CRA who took one look at everything and said, you need to get yourself to some training. They sent me off to get some clinical research coordinator training, and from the first minute I stepped into that training, I was hooked. And I've stayed in the industry ever since then. And always for me, on the site side, always interested in the patient experience, the physician experience, all of the site staff that work on these clinical trials. So whether I've been at the site or I've been at a CRO, it's always been in that relationship management space. So from Dr. Brewer's sub-basement, I moved into a site management organization, which is a group of sites that band together to try and do clinical research more efficiently and easier. And from there on, I was able to be promoted into various site positions, site manager, site director, and then I made the move to a CRO called Quintiles, where I was a strategic site relationship manager. And from there back to the site briefly, and now here at Labcorp, again, working with the sites, trying to ease everybody's path to make sure that we're getting the clinical research done as fast as we can, bringing medicines to patients that need it desperately, just as quickly but as safely as we can. The things that I love about what I've been able to do with my career is when I had my kids, I was able to work part-time. It's easy to do in this industry. I've got 3 teenagers myself right now, my first one heading off to university, and then a 17-year-old and a 16-year-old, so they're steps, 18, 17, and 16. And during their early years, I was able to work part-time actually in a pediatric practice. So I was running pediatric clinical research while I was a young mom of 3 kids. I've also been able to travel a lot. I've been to 49 out of the 50 states for work, which has been fabulous. Work's paid for those trips. When I was young and single, I could stay over a weekend in the area that I was at. I did a lot of different hiking, a lot of different tourist things. So that was really a huge perk. I know right now none of us are traveling because of COVID, but we'll be coming out of that. And travel is a great part of what some of the positions can do. And ultimately, for me, I think I found something that I was passionate about, and I've been able to find multiple different positions in multiple different therapeutic areas that have really spoken to me, and where we've made great strides in medications. And again, it all started with stirring poop in a sub-basement at a hospital. You never know where you're going to find your passion. Thanks so much. I think up next is Robin.
Thanks, Kristen. Hi, everybody. I hope that you can hear me okay. I'm actually on holiday right now. And I am out in the wilderness, and it doesn't look like that behind me because I found a room to go into, but I'm out in the wilderness in Colorado, and I'm really excited to be here. So I'm a nurse by training. And when I graduated from high school, from 12th grade, I went to a university that is very engaged with research. And I had never thought or considered research at all. I knew I was interested in getting into healthcare, into medicine somehow. I thought I'd be a doctor. And when I went in, I was a biochemistry major. I got very good grades in high school and was one of the top in my class. But coming in as a biochemistry major, I had no idea really what that meant. And I was completely overwhelmed. And changed my major to sociology. And I graduated in 3 years because I went to college all year round. I took summer classes and everything. And I graduated with a degree in sociology. And I didn't know what to do. So I worked for a year and decided to apply for nursing schools and go back and get another degree in nursing science, which is what I did. So I went back, and they had special programs at that time that you could get a whole nother bachelor's degree in an accelerated fashion. So very quickly, they condensed 4 years of learning for nursing to 18 months. And that's what I did. I went back and I got my nursing degree, and I absolutely loved it. I became a bone marrow transplant nurse, and that's not a nurse that takes out bones and puts them in other places. We actually, in bone marrow transplant, it's used in oncology for cancer care, and now for some other therapeutic areas. But we basically suppress what the bone marrow does. We stop it from producing cells and then infuse new blood cells in, and they find their way back into the bones, because that's in the bones is where you produce the blood cells. So I became a bone marrow transplant nurse and started a family. I have a son and a daughter who are now grown up. My daughter is about to get married. And I did that for a while and then got into home care and started seeing patients at home. And lucky for me, the very first clinical trial that was done in where they saw patients at home during the clinical trial, I was a director of nursing, and some of my nurses went and saw those patients. And that was almost 30 years ago. And let's see, the fifth picture that you see here is me in part of a big group that was doing new things. And one of those new things was home visits for clinical trials. And little did I know, one of the people that I worked with in this little group that was part of a huge organization, she was the founder of that model. She's the one who thought of doing that. And I became good friends with her. And even though my career took a different direction, I stayed in home care, and I didn't become part of clinical research again until 10 years ago. And that individual who was the first one who thought of doing home visits for clinical trials to make it easier for people to participate, she came and she called me on the phone, and she said, "Robin, will you join my company?" And I said, "I'd love to." And she had her own company and only focused on doing home visits for clinical trials. And I helped her build that company. We began seeing patients in over 60 countries around the world. And just like Kristen was saying, I think little did I know that my work would pay and take me all over the world. 2 years ago at this time, I was in Singapore and then in Japan speaking at a conference. And last year, during the pandemic, Labcorp bought our company. And so that's how I became part of this amazing group and the people that I'm here talking with today. But I had no idea that my career would take the path that it did. You don't have to know what you're going to be today, but I would say to all of you, be open to anything that is new and exciting and that you find exciting. I now am the head of decentralized clinical trials, which is where we allow patients, do things that allow patients to participate in clinical trials, make it easier for them. And so it's a lot of fun, and I enjoy my job because it's always something new. I've got a question for everyone. On the next slide, we have another Mentimeter poll. And when you think about your career or your job, what are the most important aspects of your job? You can write any words that you want. Oh, I love it. It's interesting. It needs to be interesting and fulfilling. Absolutely. Lots of changes. Very nice. So continue to put in your responses. In the meantime, I'm going to introduce my colleague, Earl Seltzer, and Earl's going to talk about his career.
Okay, hello everybody. Can you hear me? I will take that. Okay, perfect. I always like to do a sound check before I get started. So my name is Earl, and I, like the rest of my colleagues, I did not end up in this place on purpose. but I'll talk to you a little bit about how I got here. I think you'll find some similarities, and then and then hopefully take away a few interesting facts. So growing up, I wanted to be an astronaut and a veterinarian and a doctor, and I kind of circulated around all those things. I still would like to be an astronaut. I probably would also like to be a vet at some point. Never say never, I guess. I was I was into sports, and I kind of figured out, along the way that I did not like math. That is not something that I still am not very good at, but I really like science. And a lot of times that was anything related to the applications of science and really changing from just really focusing on that kind of space. So I went to high school, I went to university, a place called Wake Forest. It's in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I was also a biology major. And to be frank, the main reason I went to Wake Forest was because of their sports teams. That's really shouldn't be the reason you go to college, but that's the reason I did, because I liked watching the sports teams and who they played. And I also had a minor in neuroscience. And by the time I got done with with university, I was at a point where I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I really like neuroscience, and if I think back, my thinking was, I like the clinical applications of it. I don't really see myself as being one of these basic someone who sits in a lab and works there. So I'm going to go try out neuroscience, and I got into a PhD program and I hated it. So probably one takeaway is that you get sometimes you start in something, and once you get into the weeds, you actually figure out it's not for you, and it's just better to just to just stop her there. I think back on that, and if I would have followed through with it, I would have been miserable later on, because I wasn't really I wasn't really passionate about what I was doing. So in effect, I was starting over. Similar to Kristen, I had a biology degree and not much else to do with it. So then I ended up in Arizona. There's a picture of a cactus. I think that's what most people associate with Arizona. And I was looking for jobs and knew nothing about research, and got hired by a company that was doing clinical research. And it's very, very similar to how Kristen ended up in this space. I just learned it from scratch. It's really the only thing I've ever done. And I've moved through the CRO space. I joined a CRO that was at the time was Quintiles. It's now IQVIA. After I'd been working at a site for about 8 years, and I've been here in this space ever since. Feasibility is where I work. I lead the feasibility group here now at Labcorp, and in effect, the way I think I'd describe my role is I find things. So our job is to help support our physicians and our other colleagues on who on the phone with helping decide how clinical research should go. We help dig up information on how other studies have gone. We help try and understand where the patients are located, how long the studies are going to take, how many countries they might need. And that role, I'd like to think, plays a pretty important space in the execution of studies. And I like it really because one of the things I find interesting about this space is that it's very fast-paced. I have the opportunity to do lots of different things, and probably for me, which is especially evidenced over the past year, is you get to make a real impact that's on people's lives. I mean, we've been involved in many research studies that are helping find treatments for patients who are affected by COVID. And the same goes for cancer and heart conditions and things like Alzheimer's disease. It's very motivating to be a part of those types of opportunities, and just know at the end of the day that you played a role in helping plan and set up those studies for success. So that's what I like. It's fast-paced. The days are not the same. And I think I really enjoy supporting the organization, the research community. I think for me, I really, over time, I just I used to take myself too seriously, and I don't anymore. So it's take that with you. There's always a time and a place for a lightened mood, especially in the in the research space. And I think probably the other thing is just don't afraid to be right or wrong. In my role, what I mean by that is that we're looking for confidence in your own recommendations. It's okay to say you don't know, but at the same time, if you believe in what you're saying, then it's okay to be wrong. Mistakes can be made, but I think it's for me rather it's about confidence and being able to step up and say, yeah, I stand behind what I said. This is why, and sometimes I'm right, or I'd like to think, a lot of times I'm right, but sometimes I'm wrong, and that's okay. It's more I think about landing on a decision and going forward with it. So that's really a little bit about myself. I don't, I've been in this, as I said, I've been in the clinical research space ever since, for the past 16 years or so. So I really like it, and it's. I always think, too, that one of the interesting things I find about being in this in clinical research is that you don't grow up wanting to be in research, or at least I didn't. And that is really an opportunity, I think, where you just never know what's going to be waiting for you around the corner. The job found me. I like it. I'm still in it after 16 years. But I think it's just there's always opportunities that show up, and it's definitely a place that combine some of the things that I enjoyed best growing up, which were science, continuing to learn about new things. As I say, I sometimes I feel like I'm not a doctor. I just play one on TV, and it's a real opportunity to be involved in these kinds of things, even if I'm not actually, that's not actually my full profession. So that's a little bit about myself. I think I'd probably end with, like my other colleagues, great to travel, great to meet people. I enjoy getting involved in all sorts of different things and meeting different roles. So it's really, we're great as in sort of an intersection of different groups. So that's me. And just for those of you who are wondering, that is my unicorn outfit on the bottom right in that picture. That was my Halloween costume from last year. I have a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old. So needless to say, that outfit went over very well. However, it is very hot. So I would not consider wearing it in the summer. But that's a little bit about myself. And you never know what this year's costume is going to be. I think, so that's about myself. So I'm glad to have the time, and thank you for joining.
Okay, so I think Suzanne. I go next, and I believe I'm in a very tough spot now because I don't have a unicorn outfit on today, or don't I have it on a slide? So yeah, I'm in a tough spot, I feel. Anyhow, so hello everyone, I'm Suzanne, and I'm a physician at Labcorp. And I decided very early on that I wanted to be a pediatrician. So don't really ask me where I got this from. I just knew it, right? So sometimes it is like that. None of my parents is a physician. My mother was a lab technician, my father an engineer. None of our family works in the medical field, so I have no clue where I got this from. But anyhow, I went straight for it. So after high school, I actually worked for a year at a nearby university hospital as a nurse aide. And I think that year was really great because I was close to the patients. I mean, in the beginning, I really had to do things like cleaning patients' rooms, but increasingly, I got other responsibilities, and I could really be with the patients and even do some doctor's work. So I did my first injections during that year. So it really kind of confirmed my path forward, and I thought that's what I want to do. And I want to work with a team at a hospital, and I really want to work with people, with patients. So I went to university in my home country in Germany, where I also had grown up. The system in Germany is a little bit different than in the US. We do a 6-year curriculum at university, which includes what in the US is done at college. And during my last year, I worked for 4 months at a pediatric department, and that was one of the best times ever I had during university. So I worked with great doctors. I worked independently, had really other responsibilities. So, and I really felt this is one I want to work with, and I'm in the right spot here. So then I wanted to do my, of course, pediatric training, which you have to do to qualify as a pediatrician. And there I hit kind of the first challenge. So in Germany at that time, it was very difficult to find training positions. So I decided, well, I try it abroad. So, and I ended up in Norway without speaking a word of Norwegian. So I started working in Norway and then moved to Sweden and completed there my training. So, and that was back in 2003. And yeah, so I worked at the same hospital then for quite a few years there and worked really broad with all different pediatric age groups. I saw someone in the chat box mentioning babies. So I was seeing in 1 hour premature babies or newborn babies, but then when I was on call the next minute, I could go to the emergency room and see an adolescent, almost adult person. So it was very, very good time. And I really got a very broad background. However, so already during that time, I was really very much interested in clinical research as well. And I never had the patience for being a bench scientist and doing all these lab experiments. So I wasn't really good at that. And again, I believe that I don't have the patience for it. But I was much more interested in how the knowledge from the basic science actually could be transferred into real world, and how can we do this in patients, and how can we help patients with the knowledge there. So I was very much into clinical research. I did my PhD, and then at some point I had to make a decision because my husband was relocated for his work to the United States. So, and at that point, again, I had to make a decision because you might not be aware of, but when you come as a physician from a foreign country to the US, you have to go through the entire process again. You have to take again your license, which takes you approximately a year, and you have to do all your subspecialty training again. So I decided against that and thought, I go for clinical research. And as we lived in New Jersey at that point of time, there are lots of pharmaceutical companies. So I looked very much into this, and I learned about industry-sponsored research. I learned about CROs, and I actually found one who was interested in hiring me. So I started working for them in 2013 and was 7 years with them as one of the first pediatricians in that company. And I was really able to help with my pediatric knowledge and background in all the pediatric and also rare disease trials that they were doing at that time. In between, I moved to France again because of my husband's work, and luckily because I was home-based, so I could just change country and continue working. So there was no issue at all. And then last year, I came to Covance, or now Labcorp, and joined the rare disease and pediatrics teams. I'm working together with Louise. So what we're doing is really supporting, overseeing rare disease and pediatric trials. And again, I feel very much that I'm there what I want to be, because this is what I want to work with. And what I really like about my job, and we have talked a lot about this, but I think, and specifically for me as a physician, as a doctor, as a pediatrician, many people have commented on, oh, how is it when you're not working directly with patients? And for my niece, who is 13 now, she couldn't even imagine, how can you work as a doctor from home? Yes, and that's kind of a little bit difficult to understand. But we don't work directly with patients, but however, we're very much in contact, right? So we're overseeing studies, we're contributing to the design of studies. So I feel that I'm still very much in contact with patients. I really need to think like a doctor and really need to use my knowledge that I could gain during all the years that I spent at university or during my clinical work. again, also this type of work gives you a lot of opportunities, right? So we're working with a lot of different sponsors, lots of different companies. Many projects are really cutting edge science. I have lately been involved, for example, in gene therapy trials. This is a very interesting and increasing field. So I'm very much interested into this. As Earl said, every day is different, and really working with all the different people and also with the different teams is something I really enjoy. So I think what's really important for me and what I can maybe want to finish with is, or what has been important to me, really have an open mind, right? And be open for opportunities that are coming up. And if you have a dream like I had, just go for it. And I think that's all what I wanted to tell you about myself, but I think we have the next Mentimeter. And this is again so small that I can't barely see it, but okay, so what are the biggest barriers to getting the job of your dreams? And what I can read here, I have a disability. Yes, there are potentially physical handicaps. But again, in the world today where we kind of have opportunities working from home, digital work, I think that helps a lot. Money, yes. I mean, in the US, you need money to get education. I was lucky that I grew up in Germany. Education was free. But again, lots of studying, yes. But I can also tell you that's the kind of most interesting part, because I'm a very curious person. I love to learn new things. At some point, after I took my PhD, I decided I'm not gonna do any classes or courses or anything. But I can tell you last year, for example, when we had the downtime due to COVID, actually I took a certificate at Stanford University. So I think that was a great thing for me to do, because I felt I had never learned something about medical genetics. But I think that's one of the most important things, be open to learn new things all the time. And I think I stop here and we go with the next presenter, who is Louise.
Thank you. Oh, so thank you very much for all those barriers. I think they're really interesting. And I saw that someone said that money, and Suzanne talked about studying and how that costs in the US. I know that, like for Labcorp, they allow you to study, and if you work as a sort of entry-level position, you can apply to do your degree whilst you're studying as well. So I'm sure lots of other companies have those kind of opportunities too. So, and it's funny because I wanted to talk about my career quickly. And the first thing to say about mine is that I didn't have any money. I came from a single parent family and I wasn't really expected to do very much. So now I'm the senior director of our pediatric team. And like Suzanne says, I work looking at the best ways to run trials, especially in pediatric trials, and how we can make those trials run better so they work better for you. And my job's really interesting, and it's something that I never thought I would do. So sometimes you just have to find the way through it, and there are people out there and things that can help you do that as well. Yeah, so going back, I wasn't really much of a student. I decided when I was about 13 that I'd do a chemistry degree because I seemed to be better at chemistry than the other people in my class. And that's what I did. And I didn't do very well at my A-levels, which is what we do in the UK here when you're 18. I just really wanted to get the grades I needed to leave home and go to university, where I was lucky enough because in the UK at the time, you didn't have to pay to go to university. So I did my degree in chemistry and toxicology. And yeah, it was much harder than school had ever been, and I did have to repeat a year because I failed a year, and I had to kind of learn how to learn there as well. And at the end of it, I sort of decided that chemistry wasn't really what I was into. I much more enjoyed the toxicology and life sciences. So I did a master's in toxicology and got a scholarship because in the end I did get quite a good degree after learning how to work. And then when I was doing my toxicology, I did a course on clinical research, and that's when I decided I wanted to do clinical research. But I kind of had already said that I would do a PhD, and I quite fancied being called doctor, so I went off and I went and did a PhD in pharmacy. But pretty much like Earl, it wasn't really suited to me. I should have learned by this point, because of how much stuff I'd failed, that I wasn't that great a student. And I found myself, when I was doing a PhD, mostly in a lab by myself in quite a competitive environment. And I think that's when I realized that I really need to be working with people. And so then I moved into clinical research, and I've never really looked back from then. Since then, I've really found where I should be. I think I get to work with people directly, not against them. I get to use science, but I'm not in a lab being a lab scientist. And I really have enjoyed my job. So I did a fairly traditional, from their point, a CRA, so the person that travels from site to site, into project management, and now into the job that I'm doing. So during that, I got married, I had 2 kids. I also spent a couple of years traveling, and I was lucky enough to work in Australia as well as a CRA. So the job really has given me opportunities that I really thought I would never have. So my favorite things are definitely meeting and working with people from all around the world and getting to travel, but also helping to develop drugs that will change people's life, especially in rare and pediatric disease. We work in some things that will completely transform people's life, and it's so exciting to be able to do that. So I'm going to pass over to Deb. She works in patient relations. So over to you, Deb.
Great. Thank you, Louise. Can everybody hear me okay? Assuming that's a yes. So,
yeah, I can.
Hi, everybody. Great. My name is Deborah Gerlach, and I actually get to work in global patient recruitment here at Labcorp. I love my job. I don't know that anybody that is joining us today from Labcorp doesn't love their job. We all get very excited about what we get to do. I have been loving watching the chats that have gone through as well, seeing all of the different interests that you have. And I think all of our backgrounds are very diverse from what we're doing now. And from the left to the right, I actually studied psychology in college, and then went ahead and got a graduate degree in experimental psychology as well. So I decided I just was not done learning. I did not want to do the PhD track and get a doctorate, much as I would love to be called doctor. But I decided to just continue on for a couple more years to get a master's degree. And I really like the research part of the job, and I love learning about new things. And I think what's really great about working in clinical research is that we do learn something new every single day. And whether it's from different diseases that are coming through, we've talked a little bit about rare diseases, and there's always new ones popping up, unfortunately. But I think what's really great about it is that we do get a different aspect of, different people's lives. And as patient recruitment, I get to actually understand the patient and bring it right back down to who we're trying to treat. So I went to the Ohio University for my undergraduate, then University of Hartford. I actually worked in research just at the university in Pittsburgh when I lived there for about 5 years. And I was working directly with patients at that point. It was behavioral psychology, and we were studying the effects of nicotine on people's behavior. So it was really interesting, and it actually led into the creation of the nicotine patch and the nicotine gum. So that was really neat. I felt like I was really on the forefront there. I did take some time off to raise my children. They're quite a bit older than they are in the picture there. They're now 18 and 20. But when I went back to work, I went ahead and looked into clinical research. I wanted to continue along the research path, and was actually at Quintiles. I worked with a couple of the people here on this panel, and went right into patient recruitment there. And basically my job is to try and figure out where we're going to find these patients globally. So it's not just in one particular country. I've worked on studies where we've had up to 40 different countries on the study, and trying to understand different cultures, different ways of finding these patients, different ways that they're being treated in the different countries based on healthcare. So there's lots of things that I get to do. And like I said, I get to learn something new every single day. I left Quintiles and I actually went to work at a pharmaceutical company for about a year. It was a very short period of time because I was completely dedicated to oncology. And as interesting as that is, I really miss the different backgrounds and the different types of diseases I was learning about when I was in the clinical research organization at Quintiles. So I came back and ended up at Labcorp. My last picture there may not be a unicorn. However, it is an alpaca. So I got to meet an alpaca, give him a great big hug. He was very soft. I loved that experience. So I wanted to share that picture there. And one of the big takeaways that I wanted to share, if you haven't figured it out, is just never stop trying to learn something new. We get to learn something new every single day in our job, whether it's how to research something. I've seen some comments about science and learning something new with science. I don't have a strong background in science or math. I love psychology. I do get to use it a little bit every day, but I have sort of turned my career path to address that. And like everybody else, I've been able to travel all around the world on my job, and it's been great. And I get to talk daily to people all around the world as well, so which is really fascinating. So I believe, yes, the dog in the Santa hat, that is Lucy. I saw that comment come through. So that's one of my favorite pictures of her. So we'll go to the next slide. I believe we're hearing from Mala next. Oh, we have a Mentimeter. Okay, here we go. So how can drug developers encourage young people? So I love this, education, giving information. That to me is huge, especially with COVID, learning all about studies. We've seen a nice shift in clinical research, helping other people. Like I said, I guess we get to do that every single day. So I'm gonna go ahead and give Mala the last few minutes. So thanks, Mala.
Thanks, Deb. Hi, everybody. My name is Mala Puri. I am a pediatric endocrinologist. So I don't know how many of you might have heard of what an endocrinologist is, but basically I'm a hormone doctor. So I help kids with diabetes and pubertal diseases and growth diseases and things like that. I know I have very limited time, so I'm going to kind of give you my path. I was a daughter of immigrants. My parents immigrated to the US from India, and pretty much from birth had put into my head that I should become a doctor. There were no doctors in my family. You know, I really liked science and math growing up, and I said, okay, why not? This will be fun. But I always wanted to work with kids. That being said, I really wanted to be a dancer as well. But I went on the straight and narrow path and, you know, studied. I went to the Johns Hopkins University because I figured that's where most pre-medical students would get the best training. I started off as a chemistry major, but quickly learned that I did not like organic chemistry and became a biology major. I also still was able to study dance while I was there because they were affiliated with the Peabody Conservatory. So I was able to kind of fulfill both paths for a while. But then I went to medical school. I was really inspired by my family pediatrician, and so she actually came to my medical school graduation. I did both my pediatric training and my fellowship training here in the U.S. and in New York City, where I met my husband, and then moved down to North Carolina to work at the Children's Hospital at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And I loved my job. It was exactly what I had always dreamed of doing. I saw patients, but as you can imagine, you have to work really, really, really hard. And there's very long hours involved. And I ended up having 3 kids during my time there, and felt a little bit torn because I was spending a lot more time with my patients than I was able to spend with my own children. So then I feel like I kind of came into what I'm doing now by accident. You know, I am a medical monitor. I don't know if you've heard of that term. I had not. I'd never even really heard of this industry. So what happened was after I had my third child, I was approached by a recruiter about a place called Quintiles, which is a contract research organization that was looking for an endocrinologist. And I said, I don't know what that is, but I passed their office building when I go to the airport, and it looked like a really cool office. So I said, okay, well, let me hear what this is. And it was one of the best decisions I ever made. I am able to work from home. I'm able to be a mom, and I'm able to do some really cool research. I work mostly on diabetes studies, pediatric studies. I help develop protocols. I help, speak with the doctors that are conducting the study. I'm able to travel all over the world and meet such wonderful people. Actually, Deb, that you just heard from, she was one of the very first people I met when I went over to Quintiles. And every day is different. Like they said, every day you're learning something new. I have to say, when I started this job out of my medical, being like your family physician, when I started this job, it was a whole new world. It's like learning a new language. That there are acronyms for everything. So it was, I'm always learning. I'm always doing different things. So it never gets boring. And I know that we're a little bit over on time, but I can't speak highly enough for the path that kind of came to me by accident. But I've never had any regrets. And my kids are now 8, 12, and 14. So they've gotten used to me living in the office, and now with COVID, the office had to be shared by a lot of us. So I think I will wrap it up there. It looks like we're over time, but if there's any questions that have come in, feel free to shout them out.
Yeah, so I was going to say we've run out of time to answer the questions. So if everybody wants to type their questions in, we can get back to you on the answers and make sure that if there's anything you want to know or anything about our experiences, then we'll get back to everybody with the answers afterwards, because I don't want to hold everyone up.